I don't believe you. Those were the last 4 words my husband said to me before he kicked me out of our house, 7 months pregnant and barefoot on the front porch. You never forget the way someone looks at you when they think you're a liar. When the man who promised to love you forever looks into your eyes and sees a stranger. Or worse, a threat. It was a warm evening in late May. The neighbors were outside. The couple across the street had their sprinklers on, and some of the kids were running through the water, screaming and laughing. I remember standing there on the porch, my hands instinctively cradling my belly, and thinking, I should be screaming too. But I didn't. I stood there in silence while the man I married locked the door. My name is Jane Martin. I'm 34 years old. And this story isn't about heartbreak. It's about what happens when you bet everything on love and lose. Then decide you're done losing. Just 6 months earlier, my life looked exactly how I always imagined it would. I had a husband, Aaron, who worked in finance, a sweet old house in Denver with a garden I kept like it was my second child, and a teaching job I genuinely loved. I was finally pregnant after 2 years of trying. Everything felt like it was coming together. We had names picked out. We painted the nursery a soft sage green. He built the crib with his own hands one Saturday morning. We told our friends and family with smiles and tears and ultrasound photos on the fridge. But now I know, looking back, that his smile never quite reached his eyes. Not after that first prenatal appointment. Not after the bump started to show. There were signs, little things I brushed off, because that's what you do when you trust someone. When you love them. The first sign was the way he paused when the doctor estimated my due date. He did the math in his head, I saw it. And then his arm, which had been draped around my shoulder, slowly pulled away. You sure it wasn't earlier? He asked that night as we lay in bed. I mean, maybe the doctor got it wrong. I track my cycle, Aaron. I know when it happened. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. Cold. And I remember thinking, who are you even talking to right now? At first, I chalked it up to stress. Men get weird sometimes about big life changes. I told myself that. Again and again. Until the doubt stopped being subtle. So, were you ever alone with Ben after the party? He asked once while we were doing dishes. Ben was Aaron's friend. Our friend. A friend who had crashed on our couch after a holiday party, along with 3 other people. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. But when I turned to look at him, his face was stone. Are you serious? He shrugged. I just think it's a fair question. That was the beginning of the unraveling. He started locking his phone. Coming home later. He said he was meeting clients, but he started getting sloppy, the cologne that wasn't mine, receipts from restaurants we'd never go to. And still, I tried to believe there was a reasonable explanation. I asked him once if everything was okay between us. He looked up from his phone and said, "Why wouldn't it be?" And that was it. That was all he gave me. Then one Sunday morning, I walked into the living room and found him on the phone. He didn't hear me come in. I don't know, man. She says it's mine. But I can't shake the feeling she's lying. I froze. His back was to me, but I remember the tone in his voice, not anger. Not hurt. Just disgust. Like I was some scam he couldn't wait to be rid of. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I asked him flat out if he thought I had cheated. I think it's a possibility, he said calmly, like we were discussing the weather. Aaron, this is our baby. I have never been with anyone else since we got married. Not once. Then you shouldn't be scared of a paternity test, he replied. I stared at him. I'm not scared. Do it. I want you to. He paused. For the first time in weeks, I saw something flicker across his face. Not doubt. Not guilt. Just calculation. Yeah, well, he said, standing, I'm not waiting around for it. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That night, after dinner, he came into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and started stuffing in some of my clothes. What are you doing? You need to go. You're kicking me out? It's better this way. Until we know the truth. I started to cry then, full body shaking sobs. Not because of the suitcase. Because of what it meant. Because I realized in that moment he never really believed in us the way I did. He opened the front door. I stood there, begging him to listen. He just looked at me, face blank, and said those 4 words. I don't believe you. He shut the door behind me. It was 10:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because the porch light flickered right after he locked it. Like even the house was rejecting me. I slept in my car outside my sister's apartment until she woke up and saw me there. I told her everything. I hadn't cried yet, not even when he closed the door on me, but when my sister pulled me into her arms, I crumbled. He filed for separation 2 days later. Told our friends I refused to prove the baby was his. That was a lie, of course. I offered a paternity test immediately. But he said he didn't want to wait around for some lab results while his whole life was falling apart. He needed a scapegoat. And I made a convenient one. People I thought were friends stopped returning my texts. One even posted a passive-aggressive comment on Facebook, crazy how some people lie and destroy lives, then play the victim. I stopped trying to defend myself. I focused on staying healthy, on carrying my baby, on surviving the heartbreak quietly. The people who believed me, they stayed. The ones who didn't, they showed their true colors. But the worst blow came 3 weeks later. I got an email from our landlord. Aaron had removed me from the lease. Said I abandoned the property. That I forfeited my rights to the house. I stared at the message, rereading the words over and over, feeling like I was falling through the floor. Not only had he kicked me out, he had erased me. And he did it so easily, so confidently, it was like I had never lived there at all. That night, I lay in my sister's guest bed, one hand on my belly, the other gripping my phone. I pulled up a photo of Aaron and me from 2 years ago. We were laughing, holding each other, sunburned from a weekend at the lake. And I realized something. That man was gone. Or maybe he never existed the way I thought. Either way, the man who kicked me out had made one critical mistake. He thought I was going to disappear quietly. He thought wrong. I didn't show up to Aaron's birthday dinner. But I saw the photos, of course I did. Someone always sends them. There he was, smiling too wide at the head of a long oak table, surrounded by coworkers, old friends, a few faces I recognized from our wedding, and a woman with perfect makeup and hands a little too familiar with his shoulder. The cake read legend in gold script. The post had over 100 likes. My sister shoved her phone in my face that night, but I didn't react the way she expected. I just stared at the screen for a long moment, lips pressed together, and said, he used to hate that steakhouse. Said it was too stuffy. That was all. Because even though I had disappeared from the table, from the photo, from the narrative, he hadn't. In the weeks after he locked the door on me, I stopped making noise. I stopped posting. I deactivated Facebook and Instagram. I deleted all our old texts and muted group chats. The world I used to orbit spun on without me. People assumed I'd fallen apart. Maybe I had. Maybe I was still falling. But not in the way they thought. It wasn't chaos, it was silence. Intentional. Focused. I left my job without fanfare, sent one simple email to HR saying I needed to step down for health reasons, which wasn't a lie, not exactly. I changed my number. Kept only my sister and my OBGYN in my contacts. Let people wonder. Let Aaron wonder if he did at all. For a while, I stayed with my sister. Then, when I started to feel the need for my own walls, I found a one-bedroom in the back of an old Victorian owned by a quiet widow named Alma who preferred tenants who kept to themselves. She didn't ask questions when I paid in cash or moved in with only a suitcase and a pair of folding chairs. The back unit had a creaky porch covered in ivy, and I'd sit there in the evenings with my swollen ankles and mug of ginger tea, staring at nothing in particular and letting the world forget I existed. Aaron, on the other hand, made sure no one forgot him. He posted gym mirror selfies with captions like, "No stress, just reps." He tagged himself at new restaurants and bars, always surrounded by friends and women and noise. One night he posted a photo at the lake, the same lake where he once held my hand and told me he wanted a family. I was cropped out of the shot, but it was unmistakably from the same weekend. Someone in the comments wrote, "Much better days now," and Aaron liked it. My sister screenshotted it and texted, "Want me to fight him?" I didn't reply. Still, I heard things. A friend of a friend mentioned he'd gotten a promotion. Another said he was seeing someone new, a woman who was low drama and good for him. It burned, not because he moved on, but because I knew I was the story he told to get there. I was the cautionary tale. The storm he survived. The lie he polished until people believed it. And yet, I let them. For a while, I needed to. I needed space to breathe and think and heal in pieces. But the space soon became something else, a vacuum I could fill with purpose. I started therapy again. Quietly. A women's clinic near the edge of the city handed me a list of trauma counselors. I picked Dr. Elaine Morris because her voice didn't waver when I explained why I was calling. She had a cozy office with second-hand furniture and a wall of calming paintings, and when I told her everything, she didn't flinch. I wasn't just thrown out, I told her once. He erased me. Like I never existed. Dr. Morris nodded slowly, then said, "He didn't erase you. He wrote over you. There's a difference. And it means the page is still yours to take back." Those words stayed with me. I began writing. First in a journal. Then letters addressed to no one. Then timelines. Lists. Patterns. I kept a binder with tabs, legal, financial, witnesses, statements. I didn't know what I would do with it yet. I just knew I needed it. Because something inside me was waking up, a quiet storm gathering precision and direction. I stopped waiting to be rescued. I started preparing to rise. The baby grew steadily, and so did the ache of absence. Some nights, I would lie on my thin mattress, one hand on my belly, and whisper promises to him. I would tell him, "You are mine. You are loved. You will never feel unwanted, not for a second." I read books out loud. I played music I used to love. And when he kicked, I cried, not from pain, but from the impossible mix of grief and gratitude. One morning, I stopped by the bakery 2 blocks over. The woman behind the counter, Rita, had the softest voice and always remembered I didn't want my muffin heated. That day, as she handed me my order, she asked, "How far along now?" 36 weeks, I said. She smiled wide. "Almost there. You doing it alone?" I nodded, and she placed an extra croissant in the bag. "You're doing great. A lot of women couldn't do what you're doing." I thanked her and left. Walked home with a tear in my throat. Sometimes strangers see us clearer than the people who say they love us. That night, I had a moment of weakness. I looked up Aaron's Instagram. Just for a second. He had posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking together. The caption read, "To new beginnings." He was tagged at some rooftop party with executives I recognized by name. And standing next to him, yes, the same woman from the birthday photo. I stared at her hand on his chest. The comments were full of cheers and compliments. I almost threw my phone across the room. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath, opened the legal tab of my binder, and added a new document to the folder, a draft of the request for full custody. The next morning, I walked into Veronica Price's office. She was the third lawyer I'd interviewed, and the only one who didn't blink when I said I wanted Aaron's parental rights terminated. "Do you want child support?" she asked, typing notes. "No," I said firmly. "Then what do you want?" "I want my son to have nothing tying him to Aaron. No name. No legal ties. Nothing. I want him to be free of it." She sat back, crossed her legs, and said, "You understand that's not easy. Courts don't just strip parental rights without a fight. I have everything. Texts. Emails. Witnesses. He kicked me out while I was pregnant. Lied about me. Told people I was unstable. I offered a paternity test the same day he accused me." She nodded. "It'll take time. But it's possible. Especially if he doesn't contest." I looked her in the eye and said, "He won't." She blinked for the first time. "Why do you sound so sure?" "Because he thinks he's already won. He thinks I disappeared. He's not watching anymore." Veronica smiled, slow and sharp. "Good. Let's keep it that way." On the way out, I passed her receptionist, a young woman I hadn't seen before, and she glanced up from her phone and said, "Hey, someone named Aaron called a few weeks ago. Asked if you were okay." "Just once." I turned slowly. "And what did you say?" She shrugged. "I said I didn't know any Jane Martin." I smiled. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence across the page: "He will not write the ending. I will." I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole. But I was done being silent. They still thought I was gone. That I had slunk away, ashamed, broken, irrelevant. They weren't entirely wrong. But the woman they buried wasn't the woman they'd meet again. And when I came back, it wouldn't be with a whisper. It would be with thunder. It started with an email. Or rather, a forwarded email that was never meant to reach me. Veronica had created a secure inbox for all legal correspondence, and one morning, just a week after I'd brought my son home from the hospital, I saw it: innocuous subject line, no message, just a scanned letter on Aaron's company letterhead. His assistant had sent it to the wrong recipient. The letter, formal and cold, was a request to remove a dependent from his insurance plan. He claimed it was due to a private matter under review. He was already cutting ties. Already scrubbing his hands clean. Before the DNA test even came in, he was trying to disappear from my son's life entirely. And still, I said nothing. I didn't email back. I didn't scream or cry. I simply printed it out, added it to my growing binder of evidence, and kissed the soft fuzz on my baby's head as I rocked him to sleep. The DNA results arrived 2 days later. I had never doubted them, but seeing that 9,999% printed in black and white hit something deep in my chest that I hadn't realized was still tender. I stood in the hallway with the envelope in my hands and shook, not from fear or anxiety, but from the release of a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding for months. I sat on the edge of my bed, held my son in one arm, and with the other, pressed the test to my chest. "You were always mine," I whispered. "But now the world has to see it, too." Veronica wasted no time. She filed the results with the court and notified Aaron's counsel. She said he hadn't responded to any legal notices so far. His silence wasn't surprising, but it was strategic. He wanted to vanish without responsibility, without consequence, and he was counting on me disappearing too. What he didn't realize was that I had no intention of fading. I wasn't hiding. I was assembling. That was when I started to feel him watching. Or maybe sensing that I hadn't gone as quietly as he hoped. A mutual friend messaged me out of the blue. "Hey, Aaron asked about you the other night." Just casually. He said he heard you moved to California? I hadn't left the city. I hadn't even left the zip code. That same week, I noticed his new girlfriend had blocked me on Instagram, even though we'd never followed each other. Someone had told her something. Or maybe she saw something he didn't want her to see. The edges of his perfect story were starting to fray. I started reconnecting with people who knew us both, people who hadn't picked sides but were beginning to realize they'd been fed a filtered narrative. Hannah, a fellow teacher, agreed to meet me for coffee. She sat across from me, shocked and slowly furious as I laid out the facts. No drama, no embellishment. Jane, she said, her voice breaking slightly, he told everyone you ran off. That you were unstable. That he tried to help you and you just vanished. I nodded, sipping my tea calmly. That's what he needed people to believe. Because the truth doesn't make him look strong. It makes him look cruel. I should have said something, Hannah whispered. I saw the way he talked to you. I didn't know what was happening. You weren't supposed to, I replied. He made sure of that. Hannah offered to write a statement. So did 3 others. I didn't ask for pity, I asked for truth. And they gave it willingly. But the part that chilled me came a week later. A new email appeared, one clearly not meant for me. It was a message from Aaron himself to a close friend, accidentally forwarded by that same assistant. In it, he complained about the situation, calling it a phase I was going through, claiming I was clinging to a fantasy family and he was just trying to move on peacefully. He ended it with, if she tries to pull anything legal, I'll bury her with lawyers. I read that line 3 times. Then I smiled. Because I had already hired the best one. Aaron's public persona only got shinier. He launched a podcast, of all things, some bizarre blend of corporate motivation and victimhood philosophy. He titled the first episode The Power of Choosing Peace. I listened to it once, earbuds in while feeding my son, and laughed aloud when he said, sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Brave, sure. If walking away meant abandoning your child and pretending you never knew him. But as confidence bred sloppiness. The cracks kept widening. Another friend texted me, you didn't hear this from me, but Aaron got called into HR last week. Something about personal affairs overlapping with benefits reporting? That same day, Veronica received notice that Aaron's legal team was requesting a private meeting. They were ready to talk terms. You think he knows we've got him cornered? I asked her during one of our meetings. Veronica didn't look up from the stack of documents. I think he's realizing his version of events can't hold up in court. And I think he's hoping to exit before it gets messy. Which means it's the perfect time to tighten the screws. As we prepped for the hearing, I had one unexpected encounter that rattled me more than I cared to admit. I was at the grocery store, checking out with a sleepy baby strapped to my chest, when someone called my name. I turned to see Aaron's mother, Donna. Her face looked paler, drawn thinner since the last time I'd seen her. She walked over slowly, her eyes locked on the infant cradled against my body. Jane, she said, almost in disbelief. I nodded. Mrs. Davis. She glanced down. He's beautiful. Her voice cracked. He looks like you. I didn't respond, but I didn't walk away. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what to believe. Aaron said things. He told me the baby wasn't his. That you were seeing someone else. That you left because you couldn't handle it. And I believed him. I didn't want to, but I did. I'm so sorry. I stared at her. You could have asked. I didn't disappear. He just wanted you to think I did. Her eyes welled. If there's ever a time, I'd like to meet him. I mean, if it's okay with you. Someday. I considered it for a moment, then said, maybe. But not now. That night, as I added her name to a list of possible witnesses, I also added a new category to my binder: legacy. It wasn't just about ending Aaron's rights. It was about reclaiming my son's future. Free of shame. Free of confusion. Free of the lies he'd been born into. When the court day arrived, Aaron didn't show. But his attorney did, slick, overconfident, but carrying a folder of surrender. They were offering everything we asked for. Full custody. No visitation. No financial responsibility. A complete termination of parental rights. Veronica reviewed the terms, then turned to me and asked, "Are you ready to sign this?" "I am," I said. "But I want it clear that this was his choice. No sealed documents. No hidden language." He walked away. She nodded. "We'll add it to the record." The judge confirmed everything. Name change, approved. Parental termination, confirmed. Legal sole custody, granted. I left the courthouse with my son in one arm and the gavel's echo still ringing in my ears. It was done. On paper, at least. But not in practice. Because Aaron still didn't know how thoroughly I'd dismantled his story. How many people now knew the truth? How his own arrogance had left a breadcrumb trail that even his assistant couldn't clean up. He still thought this had ended quietly. That he'd walked away without consequence. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. By the time he found out what I'd done, it would already be too late. And for the first time in months, I couldn't wait to watch it unfold. Aaron posted a photo of himself at a gala the same night I finalized the paperwork with the court. Tuxedoed, jaw set, surrounded by his usual entourage of polished smiles and curated success. The caption read, "New beginnings. Full circle. No baggage." It had over 200 likes by the time I saw it. He looked every bit the man he imagined himself to be: untouchable, victorious, free. He had no idea what had already been signed into motion. No clue that the clean slate he was celebrating wasn't his. It was mine. And by the time his glass clinked against crystal and his smile tightened for another filtered photo, every corner of the lie he'd built was beginning to buckle. The first crack appeared at work. His assistant, yes, the same one who'd mistakenly forwarded me those emails, filed a formal complaint with HR. I didn't know the exact wording, but Veronica did. She forwarded me the anonymous submission made to Aaron's firm's ethics board. It outlined how he'd used company resources to discredit an ex-partner, manipulated documents for personal benefit, and fabricated a story that had no legal backing. No signature, but the language was familiar. It didn't scream revenge, it reflected someone holding up a mirror. Within a week, Aaron was placed on administrative leave. His podcast went on hiatus. His company bio disappeared, and his LinkedIn profile went inactive. But the bigger blow came through whispers, rumors of internal investigations, ethics reviews, client concern. One of those whispers reached me in the form of a message from a former colleague of his: "Did you see the article? Aaron's out." Attached was a clipped headline: "Executive terminated amid internal inquiry." No names in the title, but I didn't need them. The body of the article mentioned a confidential matter involving misuse of resources and a violation of company ethics. It might as well have had his face plastered across the page. Aaron called the next afternoon. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail again. This time, his voice wasn't defensive. It was panicked. "Jane, listen. I don't know what you've been telling people, but this is getting out of control. You need to call me back. We can work something out. I don't want this to get worse for either of us." He sounded like a man trying to grab onto a rope that had already burned through his palms. An hour later, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. A burner account, I assumed. The message was longer than the voicemail and filled with erratic logic, claims that I was bitter, that I was trying to ruin him, that I should be careful because reputations can be destroyed from both sides. It was the last part that gave him away, though. You've already gotten what you wanted. You got the kid, the name, the court ruling. Isn't that enough? That was the moment I realized something important. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about revenge. About punishment. He hadn't realized that I wasn't trying to ruin his name. I was reclaiming mine. I forwarded the email to Veronica. She flagged it with his firm's compliance officer. That same week, Aaron was officially terminated. No press release, no payout, no goodbyes. Just a quiet update buried in the HR announcements. And still, I wasn't done. I drafted my letter over 2 nights, sitting beside my son's crib, writing while he slept. It was called The Quiet Exit, and I published it under my full name on a nonprofit parenting website. I didn't write it to expose Aaron directly. I wrote it to speak to every woman who had been doubted, humiliated, and silenced. I didn't need to say his name. The truth was its own spotlight. I included a single line that seemed to echo louder than the rest. Some men don't abandon their children at birth. They abandon the moment a lie serves them better than love. Within 48 hours, the post had been shared over 5,000 times. Former coworkers messaged me. So did strangers. Women thanked me. Some cried. Others just sent a single word, seen. And tucked among the comments were 2 usernames I recognized from Aaron's former firm, one of which simply wrote, "We know now." And then came the twist I hadn't planned. A friend of mine sent me a screenshot. Aaron's ex-girlfriend had commented on the post under her own name. I was with someone who pretended this never happened. I left when I realized I was sleeping next to someone else's silence. It took my breath away. Not because I needed her validation, but because it confirmed what I'd long suspected. He hadn't just lied about me. He had lied to everyone. Weeks later, I took my son to a bookstore downtown. It was one of those lazy, golden afternoons where nothing in the world feels rushed. I was browsing the clearance table when I heard my name spoken just loud enough to break the quiet. I turned and saw Aaron, thinner, tired, his sunglasses pushed up onto his forehead like he couldn't decide whether to hide or pretend he didn't need to. "Jane." He looked at the stroller. He opened his mouth again, as if searching for the right thing to say. But there wasn't anything. Not after all this time. Not after everything he chose not to do. I stared at him without blinking. "You watched me beg for you to believe in something that was already yours. And now you don't even know what to call him." Aaron didn't argue. He didn't apologize. His mouth closed. He gave a single nod, small, stiff, the kind you give when even denial feels like a lie too heavy to lift. As I walked past him, a woman across the aisle, a mother from our old neighborhood, met my eyes. She had clearly overheard. She looked at Aaron, then at me, and gave the smallest shake of her head before turning away. That night, I tucked my son into bed, kissed his forehead, and stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. The silence of the house wasn't empty. It was clean. Steady. Mine. They thought they erased me. All they did was give me a clean page. And I wrote the ending myself.